Welcome to Midnight Murmur. Here, the night comes alive with chilling tales and spine-tingling stories. If you crave the thrill of the unknown and the eerie whisper of the supernatural, you've found your new haunt. Join us as we dive into the darkest corners of the human mind, unraveling short horror stories that will keep you up at night. Hit that subscribe button, turn off the lights, and let the murmur begin. A routine trip to Grandma's. The wind hit Meredith's tired eyes as she plunged her boot into the snow for the last time. They'd finally arrived at the cabin, although they hadn't exactly made good time. It was black as pitch outside, and as they opened the scratched red front door, the inside revealed itself to be the same. The generator outside had to be turned on, so she sent her brother to do it. Thomas groaned at the request, but he obliged anyway, trudging around the side of the house. Taking this trip with his sister during the dead of winter wasn't his idea. But Mom and their stepdad had booked themselves a cruise, and they weren't invited. So, it was either they stay home with Aunt Carol or go to the family's monthly checkup on Grandma themselves. Given the food poisoning they suffered from after the last time, they chose to go visit Grandma, and apparently they had chosen wrong. Still, she was always nice to spend time with, and they both loved her dearly, so as long as the heat worked, Meredith and Thomas could survive a few days together without fighting all that much. As evidenced by the bright lights that flicked on and illuminated the trees around them, the power was working fine, so the heat should have followed. Thomas went back inside and scraped his shoes against the front mat, which looked to be older than him and his sister put together. Meredith unpacked her backpack in their joint room. There wasn't a washing machine in the cabin, so she made sure to pack a lot of clothing, and not much else. A few books and the clothes were all the backpack could fit, after all. That's all she really ever needed, though in fact, she almost immediately started reading, even though it was well past midnight. She could go to bed soon, she thought, if Thomas would just get in bed already. He was busy setting up the portable TV in the living room, though, so it would be a while. Thomas worked pretty fast to get things set up, mostly because he was tired, but also because Mom told him Grandma apparently liked her rom-coms, so he wanted to be nice and get it done before bed. As he finished, he pulled the checklist out of his pocket and scratched off the first box. It was him and Meredith's first time visiting Grandma alone, so their mom wrote them a list of reminders to get them through the next couple days. The list was pretty short, and once they finished the last task, they were free to go. But it was imperative that they finished all of them. They had to drop the packages they'd brought into the basement, feed her pets, and rub Vaseline on Grandma's skin. The last one still seemed strange to Thomas, despite him witnessing it before, but it helped her skin not dry out as fast, especially in the cold climate, so it wasn't that awfully strange, he thought. However odd the requests were, he vowed he'd take care of them tomorrow. Meredith would do them the next day, and they'd be out of there that night. He entered the bedroom and motioned for his sister to turn off the light as he climbed into bed. She put her book on the bedside table and pulled the chain on the lamp, giving the room up to the darkness once more. They laid there, trying to sleep, but neither was particularly tired. The house did that to them every time they stayed with its inherent eeriness, but it was worse tonight, probably because they were alone. After 15 minutes of the wind howling outside, Meredith broke the silence. "Did you get the TV set up out there?" "Yeah, it wasn't too hard, actually." "Did you put on a rom-com for her?" "No, I just left it on the news." "Shit. I mean, it's not like she's actually watching the TV, so." Meredith rolled over to face Thomas when she heard this. "You have to leave the TV on rom-coms. It's on the checklist." I know. I was just caught up with the local news. The missing hikers were on it. Poor bastards, they are. Go change the TV, she might not watch it. But you know how it pisses the pets off." Thomas sighed and rolled out of bed. She was right. He had forgotten, but he was just starting to drift off. He walked back into the living room and changed the channel before apologizing to his grandma. He set the remote in her lap and started to walk back to the bedroom. As he walked down the hallway, he glanced into the basement stairwell and froze. Staring up at him were 5 sets of eyes. Thomas once again sighed and snapped his fingers at the eyes, causing them to disperse from the bottom of the stairwell. Grandma kept her pets in the basement. His mom called it their secret lair, where they could run around without having to worry about making too much noise. They never liked Meredith, but loved him, which was probably why they listened to his snapping and scattered back to their cages. He got back into the bedroom and flopped back into bed. It was going to be a long day tomorrow, but as long as he had the checklist in hand, he'd be okay. Meredith cooked breakfast the next day, as a thank you to her brother for handling the first day's worth of tasks. She cooked some for Grandma as well, as while she used to be a great cook, her mind had since deteriorated. Meredith enjoyed cooking, though, so it was no problem to her. Fresh stew sounded pretty good right now. In the living room, Thomas rubbed more Vaseline onto his grandma's bony old hands and grimaced. He never liked doing this, but it was the last time he'd have to do it for a while. Plus, he was almost done for the day, after he took the duffel bags they'd brought into the basement. While he was down there, had to deal with the pets scuttling around his feet, while he looked for a place to set the bags. As he left the basement, he closed the door behind him, so they couldn't get out last time they did. It didn't go well. As they ate, Thomas looked at his sister with a somber look on his face. How much longer can you keep doing this? Doing what? This, all of this. None of this is normal. What do you mean? Helping your grandmother out is a completely normal thing to do. I've been doing it since I was 6 years old. Yes, I know. But that's the problem, we never had a choice in the matter. We weren't asked whether or not we wanted to participate in this. I didn't ask to care for these animals, or make monthly trips here in general. What's the harm in it? What's the harm in it? What's the harm in it? The harm in it is that we're masquerading as normal people when the things we do here are not what normal people do. Mir, look, I know you're frustrated. It's not easy work, but we're going to be out of here soon. If we don't take care of her and the pets, who else will? Thomas looked down at his stew. She was right, they loved their grandma, and they couldn't just abandon her and her house. They'd finish out their trip strong, and everything would be okay. Later that night, Meredith cooked their dinner, while Thomas sprayed some perfume in the living room. It reeked in that house, as most older buildings do, especially given that some of the food in the cooler had spoiled. Leave it to Grandma to keep food for so long that it spoils despite being frozen, Thomas thought to himself. They ate dinner in the living room and watched the news again. As Meredith shoved another spoonful of stew into their grandmother's mouth, the TV flashed to a breaking news segment. The reporter on duty outlined that there'd been a breakthrough in the case of the local missing hikers in the form of DNA found at the scene of the crime. This, remarked the reporter, was the first piece of evidence in the Ripper case, and was a promising lead. The two turned to look at each other, and Thomas nodded. Well, that's for the best, then. Yep. After feeding the pets from the duffel bags again, Thomas was more than ready to go to bed, and Meredith apparently echoed that sentiment, already being fast asleep when Thomas walked into the bedroom. He flicked the light off, and was out cold as soon as he hit the pillow. Meredith awoke in the middle of the night to flashing lights outside the window. She rubbed her eyes and turned to look at the window on her right and screamed. She hopped out of bed and shook Thomas so hard that he woke up thinking there was an earthquake. After his initial panic stopped, Meredith broke the news to him there was someone outside of her window. They raced into the hallway, ready to execute the home defense plan that their mom and stepdad had crafted. As they passed the front door, a bang echoed out from behind it, and a voice followed. Come out now. It was a voice they'd never heard before. They burst into the kitchen, and inside of the drawer closest to the back door, retrieved Grandma's old pistols. They tested them every year to make sure they still worked, in case of emergencies like this. Thomas immediately began delegating what they were going to do. He would hide in the basement with the pets, keeping them safe, while she would go into the small hall closet. As they prepared to book it, a figure appeared at the back glass door and started wailing on it with their shoulder, trying to break it. Luckily, it was several layers thick and tempered, so they had some time before the intruders got in. Thomas entered the stairwell and carefully slid into the basement, as to not let any of the pets out. He slammed the door and locked it with both the handle and deadbolt locks, praying under his breath that they held up. He slid into a corner, behind some boxes, and began loading the pistol. It was old, but in a pinch, it would do the trick. Meredith entered the closet as the front door began to cave in. They were using excessive force against it, and given its age, it didn't stand a chance. She fumbled with the bullets in her right hand, dropping them clumsily before scrambling to pick them up. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway, along with the same words they'd heard before. "Come out now." She finally managed to get the bullets into the gun, and held it up as the footsteps grew closer. Judgment was here, and she was ready to face it head-on. Thomas, hearing the basement door begin to cave under the pressure of pounding on its other side, readied his weapon as well. Although he didn't know it, they were both thinking the same thing. It was exactly what they'd prepared for. The police officer flung the closet door open to reveal a girl, no older than 25, holding a pistol to her chin. As he screamed at her to drop the gun, she began giggling. As he backed up, ordering her to drop the gun and come out of the closet, her laughing grew louder. All of a sudden, her laughing stopped, and she stared blankly at him before she pulled the trigger. At that moment, he closed his eyes, but the sound of her skull shattering was more than enough detail for him to still feel sick. He feebly looked at his partner down the hall and weakly called out, "1056. Equal sign in the stairwell." Another officer was preparing the door-breaching battering ram for one final hit when he heard a gunshot echo out from behind the door. With one giant swing, the old oak door collapsed into rubble, and he stepped in, looking for a light switch. He eventually found it in the form of the chain that hit him between the eyes, and without hesitation, he pulled it. Equal sign, he saw a young man on the floor, dead with a hole in his head and a pistol lying next to his body. A suicide, he thought to himself. Just fucking great. He raised his weapon and rounded the corner, expecting to see 10 more guys with guns all trained on him. That would have been the preferable sight. Instead, he saw 5 humans, completely naked, staring at him. Their legs had been removed at the thigh, and the wounds had long been sewn up, from the looks of it. The hands had been removed from their arms, and it looked like their necks had been operated on. They'd been chained to the wall on generously long leashes for God knows how long. Seeing this, the officer immediately grabbed his radio and called his squad to the scene, before making his way back towards the basement door. On his way, he stopped to inspect the man's body, and the note lying next to it according to it. This was the pet room. Within a half hour, the scene was flooded by dozens of officers, scouring the house for evidence. They'd recovered 4 bodies from the scene so far, excluding those of the presumed ripper or rippers, as it seemed one was found in the cooler upstairs, and 2 others were found in duffel bags in the basement. It appeared that the bodies in the basement had bites taken from them. The final body was that of an old woman, sitting in a chair in the living room. It looked like she'd been dead for some time. She was nearly skeletal. It came to take me away. I'm homeless and living out of my car, but not for the reasons you'd think. You see, I'm what you would call a stereotypical mama's boy. Never had any girlfriends, not many friends either. I was an only child who spent all my time clinging to my mother. I didn't have a dad, but my mom made up for it. When she wasn't working, she spent all of her time with me, taking me to the movies, playing video games together. She was my entire world, the only person I needed. Unfortunately for me, this piece would all come crashing down. In my early 20s, my mom started getting sick. I tried so hard to take care of her and prayed every single day. But things only got worse, and the cancer would quickly take her life. Now, without hope and all alone, I spiraled into a deep depression. House notes, bills, it all rested on my shoulders now. It was safe to say that I was a deer in the headlights. I had no social skills and no relatives who were willing to help. Before I knew it, I was living in a house with no lights or running water. I was in the worst situation of my life and ended up in a dark place. To keep from falling into drugs or something even worse, I had to leave. One day, I packed up my car and didn't look back. I drove for what seemed like forever, seeing more of the world than I ever had before. I met all sorts of people during my travels, some freaks but others pretty cool. Literally everything was a new experience for someone who had been sheltered all of his life. But oddly enough, I didn't feel afraid at all. I did miss my dear mother, but there was a feeling of freedom with this new life. Until one day, something happened that forced me to consider finding a more traditional home. The story I'm about to share is one that most probably won't believe. But I know what happened, and it will stick with me for the rest of my days. It all started around midnight on a lonely country road. There was nothing but cow fields and old barns as far as the eye could see. I was trying to make it to the next town before calling it a night. But I had been driving all day and was getting pretty tired. Seeing as how I didn't want to wreck my only home, I decided it was time to pull over. I parked on the outskirts of one of the large cow fields. It was a clear night with stars filling the sky, so I figured it would be nice to break out my tarp and enjoy the view. After setting up, I sat down and opened up a bag of chips. In moments like this, I always found myself thinking of my mother. I missed the times we shared together, which is why I had to leave. I didn't really know what life had in store, but there was no going back. I couldn't stomach having to live alone in that empty house. Over time, my eyes started to get heavy. I turned on my side ready to get some shut-eye, hoping an angry farmer wouldn't greet me with a shotgun the next morning. As I did, the most peculiar thing happened. What seemed like a ball of fire or some sort of meteor whizzed by. Thinking it was a shooting star, I paid it no mind. I would attempt to nod off, but that proved impossible, as the nearby woods gave off an ominous orange glow. My first thought was that this could be a forest fire, but as I rose to my feet, a loud whirring sound filled the air, to the point that I started having strong headaches. I limped back to my car writhing in pain, prepared to call for help. While trying to dig for my phone, I heard a strange thud from behind me, sort of like footsteps from a very large person. I turned to see whom or what was behind me. That's when I saw it. A giant creature about 7 or 8 feet tall in stature crept towards me. It seemed to be in some sort of metallic suit, giving off the same glow from before. The being wore an astronaut-like helmet that hid its facial features. It tried reaching for me with a slender and wrinkled arm. I instantly screamed and locked myself inside my car. Tears started to swell as I feared for my life. Never before had I seen something so horrifying. It was obvious this being was not of our world. I grabbed a knife from my glove box and clutched it tightly. Not that it could stand up to a literal freaking monster. The next thing I knew, its bony 3-fingered hand was pressed against my window. I was certain that the being would have no trouble shattering the glass. Quickly, I crawled onto the back floorboard and started to pray. I just lost my mother a few months ago, and now a monster was trying to kill me. What did it want? And was my life seriously about to end here? All these things swirled through my mind until I heard a voice, one that came from within my own head, speaking in a very kind tone. "Do not fear, human, for I've come to you with an offer. Come with us and learn all there is." see sights that no other human could fathom. When you return, eternal knowledge will belong to you and you alone. I understood the words clearly, but my fear overpowered everything else. Before giving the offer any thought, I yelled to the top of my lungs, "No, Jew, just leave me alone, go away." Following my outburst, everything went silent. Save for my nervous breathing I tried so desperately to hide. It seemed like an eternity had passed, and I didn't hear anything. So reluctantly, I peered from the window to check my surroundings. I was relieved to see that this horrifying entity was no longer there. I glanced to my left, then the right. It was really gone. Naturally, I rushed into my front seat and started the engine. Before pulling off, I saw a large glowing object rise up from the trees. It was cigar-shaped and gave off the same loud humming sound from earlier. Even though I was terrified, I found myself transfixed by this once-in-a-lifetime moment. Before I knew it, the craft shot up into the air faster than I could blink. Afterwards, I peeled out of the field and kept driving until I found civilization. This was truly a harrowing experience for me, one that truly changed my outlook. Never had I believed in the supernatural or aliens, but my experience was all too real. I ended up keeping this story to myself for the longest. After all, a homeless guy who saw an alien probably wouldn't sound good. I ended up finding myself a job and an apartment. No longer interested in the nomadic lifestyle. Presently, I've even started dating a beautiful waitress. Even though my life is pretty normal, I still have strange moments. Every once in a while, whenever I'm alone, I feel as if I can still hear the creature calling out to me, telling me that they're still watching and haven't forgotten me. But for the sake of normalcy, I try to ignore it. I often wonder what would have happened if I went with them. Was it a trap to hurt me, or would they have really shown me all these amazing things? I guess it doesn't matter now, but I'll never forget my close encounter on that dreary farmstead. The Insatiable Void, a tale of Regorthos. Captain Ilar Voss's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the command console, his knuckles white with tension. The view screen of the IS horizon showed only an impossibility, a swirling, pitch-black void, where the planet Kepler 186f should have been, hungrily devouring the very starlight around it. What in God's name is that? His first officer, Tomas, whispered, his voice cracking with fear. Ilar's mouth went dry, the taste of terror bitter on his tongue. Ancient texts discovered in a god-forsaken temple on Mars flashed through his mind, filling him with a dread so profound it threatened to stop his heart. "It's Regorthos," he breathed, the alien name burning in his throat like acid. The hunger between stars. As if summoned by his words, the void pulsed, and a sound like a billion screaming souls tore through the ship's calm systems. The crew writhed in agony, blood trickling from their ears as an otherworldly voice boomed, "Quantras Vorlok Natharak." Ilar's mind reeled as the alien language seared itself into his consciousness, its meaning horrifyingly clear. All will be consumed. All will become one. Suddenly, Ilar's vision fractured. The void on the view screen seemed to reach out, enveloping him in a maelstrom of cosmic horror. For a heartbeat, he saw a planet-sized mass of writhing tentacles and gaping maws, gnashing at the fabric of reality itself. The image shifted, revealing an impossibly vast digestive tract lined with the screaming faces of consumed civilizations. Ilar's sanity frayed at the edges as he struggled to process the incomprehensible sight before him. "Zathgorm Ekthar Regoros," the voice thundered again, shaking the very hull of the ship. "Feed the eternal growth, expand the cosmic flesh." The vision twisted, and Ilar found himself staring into a void deeper than space itself, rimmed with teeth that seemed to devour light and matter alike. He felt his mind stretching, straining to contain the vast, terrible knowledge forcing its way into his consciousness. Around him, the crew's composure shattered. Lieutenant Sarah Chen stared at her hands, her eyes wide with terror. Are these my hands? Have they always looked like this? She began to claw at her skin, as if trying to peel away a reality she no longer trusted. Ensign Dmitry Volkov huddled in a corner, rocking back and forth. "It's all a lie," he muttered, his voice a hoarse whisper. "The ship, the stars, our entire existence, just food for the great hunger." Tomas staggered to the ship's controls, his face ashen. "We need to get out of here, Captain." His fingers flew over the console, but the engines remained ominously silent. "Why won't it work?" he screamed, panic rising in his voice. "Is this even real? Are we real?" Ilar stood transfixed, watching as tendrils of absolute darkness began to stretch out from the void. Each one was tipped with a slavering maw filled with teeth that should not exist in our reality. As they snapped and gnashed at the space around them, Ilar's mind was assaulted by another vision. He saw Rogorthos devouring entire galaxies, stars winking out like dying fireflies in its wake. The cosmic flesh of the entity pulsed with the stolen life energy of countless species, growing ever larger, ever hungrier. Ilar fell to his knees, clutching his head. He felt as if his skull would split open, unable to contain the horror of what he was witnessing. In his mind's eye, he saw a map of the universe, with an ever-growing black spot representing Rogorthos' relentless expansion. The sight filled him with a terror so profound it threatened to unmake his very being. "Captain!" Tomas's panicked voice seemed to come from a great distance. "The ship's being pulled in. We can't break free." He paused, his eyes wild with a new, terrible thought. Or, have we always been inside it? Were we ever truly free? Ilar turned to his crew, tears of black ichor streaming down his face. His eyes, once a warm brown, now swirled with the infinite darkness of the void. "Don't you see?" he said, his voice a mixture of terror and ecstasy. "Resistance is futile. We are nothing but morsels to Rogorthos. Our only purpose is to feed the great hunger." As the ship's alarms blared, Ilar felt his sanity slipping away. He began to laugh, a sound of pure madness that chilled the blood of his crew. They backed away from him, terror etched on their faces. "Nitharax Vothilak Rigoros," he screamed, his voice no longer his own. "The feast begins, the assimilation is at hand." The view screen cracked as a massive tendril slammed into the ship. Tooth-lined maws opened along its length, drooling a viscous fluid that ate through the hull like acid. As the metal dissolved, Ilar caught glimpses of a cosmic tapestry of consumed realities, with Rogorthos as both the weaver and the thread. He watched, transfixed, as universes were born and died within the entity's vast gullet. Sarah Chen let out a hysterical laugh as the hull breached. "Yes, let it in. Let the truth devour us." She spread her arms wide, welcoming the cosmic horror. Dmitry curled into a fetal position, whimpering. "It was always here. It will always be here. We are nothing. Nothing." The crew's screams were cut short as they were sucked into the vacuum of space, their bodies contorting as they were pulled towards the waiting mouths of Rogorthos. Tomas clung desperately to a handrail, tears streaming down his face. "Captain, please, we have to do something." His eyes darted frantically around the disintegrating ship. "This can't be happening. This can't be real. Wake up, Tomas. Wake up." But Ilar was beyond reason now. He watched in horrified fascination as his crew was devoured, their flesh and consciousness absorbed into the cosmic mass of Rogorthos. He felt a perverse joy, knowing that they would live on as part of something greater, something eternal. As the ship disintegrated around him, Ilar spread his arms wide, welcoming his fate. "Rogoros Quantras Vorlok," he cried out. "Rogorthos consumes all. Rogorthos is all." Tomas made one last desperate lunge for his captain, hoping to shake him out of his madness. But as their fingers brushed, a tendril of darkness wrapped around Tomas, pulling him into the void. His scream of terror was cut short as he vanished into one of the countless maws. In his final moments of consciousness, Alar's mind expanded beyond the confines of his mortal form. He perceived Rogorthos in its entirety, a being of such cosmic scale and alien nature that it defied all human comprehension. And behind it all, he sensed a presence so vast and incomprehensible that even Rogorthos was nothing but a speck before it. Ixalmathras. The name echoed in his mind as his body was torn apart and absorbed into the cosmic flesh of Rogorthos. In his final moments of individuality, Ilar understood the horrifying truth. Rogorthos, this god of eternal hunger, was merely one manifestation of the infinite horrors that existed in the mind of Ixalmathras. As Ilar's consciousness dissolved, becoming one with the all-consuming mass of Rogorthos, the final words of the hunger chant resonated through the void. Rogoros Nitharax, Ixalmathras Quantras Vorlock. Rogorthos feasts eternal, within Ixalmathras's all-consuming reality. And in the depths of space, Rogorthos continued its relentless expansion, an unstoppable tide of hunger that would one day consume all of creation. The screams of countless civilizations echoed through the cosmic void, forever feeding the insatiable appetite of forces beyond comprehension. Somewhere in the vastness of space, a lone distress signal from the Is horizon reached a distant outpost. As the message was decoded, a single, chilling phrase emerged. "Beware the hunger. Rogorthos comes." But it was already too late. In the distance, a swirling darkness began to grow, heralding the arrival of a horror beyond imagination. The cycle of cosmic consumption would begin anew, with Rogorthos as its herald and Ixalmathras as its unfathomable architect. Twisted panties and chaos coins. I woke up with sand under me, my wool blanket stretched over me, and my feet sticking out. My eyes searched the walls of the tent, finally recalling that I'd fallen asleep in a caravan tent provided by the expedition company that would take me to Mount Sinai. I was searching for a coin, not an ancient one, but instead one from the YouTube series You Can Never Escape. I'd come a long way to get a chance at finding these special coins with the god Apepi. They were supposed to be hidden on a diverted path on the journey to Sinai. I'd be parting from the group and trying to go alone. I had some concern with parting from my tour guide. I plucked the flashlight in my mouth and ecked the coordinates I'd scribbled on my paper. Not normally a coffee drink. I took mine cold and black, Turkish coffee to be exact. It was early, and I had my reasons. Namely, I eyed the shitter hoping to take my turn squatting over the hole, so I didn't have to do my business in the hot Sahara. A man wearing a worn, thin t-shirt was standing waiting on me at the local cafe. Several people were sitting waiting on their tours to gather at the blue tables covered in colorful picnic vinyl tablecloths. My guide was taller than the rest, and even though he looked Egyptian, there was something about him that made me realize he wasn't actually from Egypt. Besides the rock t-shirt, there was something about his movement that seemed Western. Several of us followed him with the excitement that he was going to take us on an expedition. I observed there was not just a nice, worn, rugged, outdoorsy look to him, but there was also artistic quality to him. Half my age. The first segment was several of us piling in a series of jeeps and off-roading our way to a village that was awaiting our business. Once there, I noticed dozens of truckers and bus drivers. It dawned on me that I was in what would be a village mega truck stop, except with much more open air than in the States. I went towards the back and waited my turn in the dark hallway to use the restroom. I didn't need to go, but some stickiness was stuck on my hand from my Egyptian sweet roll. As I waited, I realized the man in the rock t-shirt was in a dim back room, not much bigger than a cubbyhole. Gathered around a small table, he was exchanging business with three mafia-looking men, slapping greasy eggs into their lips as fast as they could slurp. He looked suddenly and swiftly in place with these bald head men in their long robes. It came to me that he fit here, that he was familiar with where we were. He caught me analyzing him. Our eyes met together. In the room of the men, there was muffled crying coming from the door and back there. Back door muffled. I could hear someone holding back snuffles of tears. It sounded like their mouth was sealed with duct tape. The man in the Ade shirt and I exchanged glances, him growing fidgety and uncomfortable at the thought of me watching his business transpiring. I pretended to look away, but like a fox I took a sly glance. It was some sort of drugs or illegal contraband. I was sure of it. I turned my nose up in disgust. He's probably owned by those men, I bulked, purging my lip out like I had the urge to spit him out of my mouth. Putting his dirty hands on the back of one of the men, he craned his neck proud. The nerve of him, proud of his dirty business. I noticed the knife in his pocket then, a slender handle-looking one, crafted like a cheap Egyptian replica. I didn't want him to know I had seen anything, but I couldn't stop my lips. They were quivering in repulsion. He sat down to slurp up an egg with the men. Fully at their level now, I said to myself in shivers to shake him off my skin, turning my back on him to go wash my hands. By the time I got outside, he was already there standing by the Jeep with the door open like he was waiting to put me in a chariot. "I wanted you beside me," he said as I sat in the passenger seat beside him. I could tell the accent had somewhere from Europe in it. "Seeing as how you seem to be traveling alone, I maneuvered it so you are just with me. I thought you might like someone watching out for you." He winked. I shivered slightly. "My aunt awaits me back where you got me," I lied. I noticed blood on his pants. "She's very religious," I added, seeing the mysterious blood splatter on him. He smiled at me and offered a cigarette, but I refused, cracking my window to avoid the smell. "Are familiar with these coordinates?" I inquired, tugging the paper out of my pocket. "It is some sort of geocache game," he asked, curious. "Or is it where you put your husband's dead body?" His face lit up like a happy Buddha, his high cheekbones going up, his eyes shining in childlike delight at his own black humor. I gave him a sour face. I wondered if it was his intention to scare me. I stared out the window like he was boring me. In the reflection, I watched as his green army pants hit the accelerator. "I hope you know what you are doing," I said, breathing out too slowly in a way that showed my disapproval. But the roughness of last night's sleep got to me, and I leaned on the windowsill to rest. My hair flying with the wind as we sailed along faster. Next thing I knew, I woke up with sand under me. My hands stretched along it, taking in the grainy textures of the dusty earth. I could feel a bump on my head. My eyes searched for the Jeep, but once I found it, there was nothing wrong with it. The man in the weathered Ade shirt was nowhere to be found. I picked over my pocket seeking for the coordinates, just to find the paper missing. I jumped up to inspect the back of his Jeep. Maybe this was a setup. I checked the trunk for duct tapes and other signs of bondage. My mind ran fast through a horror movie of what-ifs when I found a pair of pantyhose all crumpled up with a pair of panties in the center balled up like an egg. I pitched them down before I got my fingerprints on his crime scene. I opened the cooler he had back there and found dry ice with what appeared to be a heart, if my anatomy class was holding up in my memory right. He must be into some sort of satanic worship, I thought, staring at the ventricles all sealed up in plastic. "He's going to take my organs," I said, grasping my own heart. I went to check under the front seat for more evidence and found ropes and lighters. I gathered them all in the sand. I would hide them from him. When he returned, I would be behind the only big rock that was around. I'd hop out and knock him with my glass bottle of cheap vodka. I'd crack it over his head, spilling the alcohol all over, grab the keys, rope him up, and light him on fire and take off in the Jeep. I'd drive straight back to that last village and report him to the police. No, he and those gangsters are probably in with the police, I thought aloud. I stole one of his cigarettes and used the Jeep door to make a small shade tent. My boots kicked the sand and wished for one single cloud to have mercy on me. I rummaged around the back seat and hidden under the seats found 3 more bags of whatever contraband he was selling. I sniffed it and decided it had smelled of roots and hypnotic flower smell. It was some sort of earthy matter. I threw it down before it absorbed in me skin and killed me. I wasn't sure what this sick perp was into, but I was sure I was getting out of here. The parch on my lips let me know it was urgent. I'd lure him over, use the string to trip him, pretend I want sex, feel up his pants, steal his keys. I thought again. I'd use the long hose I found in the back, the Jeep, to siphon off some gasoline, the hose he likely used to murder women, and take their possessions back to those snaky, gangster egg eaters, probably selling organs. I put my bandana and used water bottle to use. I'd throw a fiery homemade Molotov cocktail at his head. I tried again, flexing my whole body, stretching as my muscles grew languid in the heat. I'd just charge at him with my pocket knife, go for his man jewels with my knife, swiftly go for the keys and run as fast as I could. Leave him for dead in the desert like he deserved. Maybe the gasoline cocktail was best choice. I decided, grabbing the tube and trying to pop the gas cap. I was shoving the tube into the chute when I heard laughter ringing over the desert sands, tinkling like little bells over the wind, like a child's nursery rhyme. I could see his tall, lanky figure coming up over a mound of sand. He was smiling from ear to ear, humming as he danced along, gliding over the sand. He walked in a sidewinding zigzag, and I decided he must know I'm going to ambush. He's trying to outsmart me. In an instant, his eyes saw me with my hose stuck down the fuel filler. He looked surprised to see me and hurried towards me. I whipped it out, ready to snuff the gasoline part of the hose up his nose if I needed to. "I'm surprised to see you up," he said, his curly hair flopping around. I could tell he was still debating the best way to approach me. "Oh, you rather take me laying down," I said sarcastically. "I'm a fire starter," I warned him. "What are you thinking, you crazy lady?" he said, still jovial. I heaved one of the plastic baggies of tar plant matter at him, hitting him as hard as I could. "What is that?" I said with no humor. His hand grabbed his shoulder where the baggie pelted him. "Damn, woman, that stings as bad as an ass bite." He leaned over to pick it up off the ground and dust it off on his pant leg. Sensing my opportunity, I jumped his back like a flea jumping a dog, clinging as tight as I could to his 80 shirt. "You could have at least said to me, 'Hey, what's your name, Naja Hage?' You know, before you jumped my back," he said as he flipped me off effortlessly. "Well, I'm Mop," I blared back, dancing around. "Nice to meet you, Naja. Did you discover where I put my husband's dead body yet?" It was me that laughed hysterically this time and abruptly diverted and ran the hose up one of his nostrils before he knew what happened. I tried to wedge the gasoline-soaked bandana under his nose with my open fingers. I tried to hold it all there as I went for the lighter. "Why, Ma? Why? I found your location on your paper for you, and this is how you treat me," he said, battling my hands off his nose as I was coming at him with my lighter. The coordinate paper caught fire as Naja wrestled me to the ground. I woke up with sand under me, my wool blanket stretched over me, and my feet sticking out. My eyes searched the walls, but there was none. Just a crackling fire, sparking all the way to heaven in the dark of night. He was sitting there, outstretched with his feet near the fire with not a care in the world. "Did you knock me out twice in one day?" I asked with venom in my tongue. I was already spitting like a mad viper, charging at him. He threw the miswak stick out of his mouth that he had been chewing on and jumped up to stop me. "Why would I just be sitting here waiting on you to wake up if I was up to something?" Naj snapped back at me. I slipped my hands over my own derriere to see if my panties were still on and not all twisted up in his Jeep trunk. They were. "You are the one that passed out on your own gasoline. You are the one that fell asleep and didn't wear your seatbelt earlier and bumped your head when we stopped," he answered logically. I was busy trying to decide if I'd left my pants unzipped to hear him fully. Are you always this suspicious-minded? He asked, keeping one eye on me. You're a bit dangerous, don't you think? I snarled with lightning rushing through me. I levitated off my feet. I'm dangerous, am I? You are the one trading illegal contraband, speeding over sand, stealing organs, and keeping ladies' panties in your trunk. The words crackled out of my eyes. Illegal contraband, organs. What are you even on about? Better yet, what are you on? Naja asked, lighting a cigarette. How about you give me some? Because I was moving herbal medicine to people that need it, because it helps ease their death. Is that such a crime to you? This time he flung the herbal matter at my shoulder, pinging it. Ever heard of mandrake plant extract? Naj asked, exhaling. I coiled up my nose, refusing to apologize. I was searching for a coin, not an ancient one, but instead one from the YouTube series You Can Never Escape. I'd come a long way to get a chance at finding these special coins, and now you ruined my paper. I ruined your paper, he said, snuffing at the stupidness of that statement. I started to notice his beauty. How striking he looked. Like a pharaoh, if you can picture one looking a bit more modern. Like a Calvin Klein model. I just mean, I'm here alone and God only knows where, stuck under the moon and stars with you. Suddenly the poetry of what I just said struck me. I fell to the ground laughing in fits, nearly peeing my pants at the absurdity that I was sitting under the desert stars, searching for coins with such a beautiful vagabond that I think is trying to kill me. And he's trying to save people, and I'm trying to kill him. I laughed till tears flowed, releasing the tensions of the whole day into the desert sand, drying up and disappearing as soon as they appeared. And when I opened my eyes, his long fingers were holding outstretched asterisk, the coin asterisk, right in front of my eyes. I grabbed it, looking it over. I could see the faint lines of the third printer that had been used to cast it. And there were the words I had searched to see. Not only were they meaningful to me, the coin itself was ultra rare and valuable for resale. These music earplugs change existence. These music earplugs bend existence for me, and I bought some online which were expensive. But I got them anyway as they looked cool. As soon as I put them on, I was instantly in another world, and nothing could bother. I used to think there were no differences between headphones and music earplugs, but now I can experience they are truly different. I was in disbelief how different music earplugs did to my life, and I was so glad to buy them, and I didn't have any anxiety towards the public anymore. These earplugs are magical. Then the earplugs started to change my physical body, as I could feel my bones bending and my organs being moved around. Even my blood was moving around outside of me, and this change to my physical body really made things so abnormal. These earplugs were really changing my existence, and I really liked it, and my body shape had changed to something else. My normal day had changed to something else, and it was good. No one can take changes to their existence because it isn't for the faint of heart. For my body to change with my existence, I had to feel some pain as well. Then my very mind had to change, and I started getting flashbacks of my past, and I could hear a ringing sensation. I could then see multiple colors in the millions, all at the same time, and I couldn't believe that music earplugs that I bought from Amazon could do all of these things. My mind was now changing, and it was more outwardly as dream and reality were now being infused. Experiencing all of this gave me such pleasure as I knew I had changed and my existence had changed, and I didn't want to go back. As all of this was happening, I didn't have any worry at all. I didn't care about what normal people were afraid about. These earplugs truly have changed my life, and I could feel myself in the air. I felt so free, and that nothing mattered. It was like I was being freed from the physical world, and from my physical body. It was like I was evolving into something much more superior now, and I wanted to be superior. These bodies of ours have so many problems with them. Then I remember having glimpses of being back in the real world, and I was in a different place. I found myself in the hospital, and basically what happened, as I was listening to music on my earplugs while walking outside. I didn't notice the car coming at me as I crossed the road. Unnoticed. It's amazing the things that can go unnoticed when you're working in the moment. All your attention focused on the task at hand. It's ironic, really. All that attention to detail focus like a laser. And yet it's because of this we can miss things that are all around us. I wouldn't say I'm a leader in my field, but I'm good at what I do. I had to be to land the position I have or had. I have the feeling none of this is going to matter anymore. I work as a scientist in a particularly secure level of Porton-Down research and development facility. It's the UX primary mod base of operations for dealing with all kinds of biological and chemical agents, primarily dealing with countermeasures and containment. Whenever there is an unknown chemical agent or a strange disease going around, the samples are sent there. Remember the Salisbury poisoning incident. It was Porton-Down that discovered the use of the Novichok nerve agent. It was supposed to be just like any other day we had, an unknown package, a possible foreign contaminant, extraction, isolation, and an analysis to see what we were dealing with. We had the first samples less than a day after the incident. I had been spending more and more time away from home lately with work being busier than usual. There were more samples than usual, and all marked with a high level of urgency. Looking back, that should have been the first warning sign. But I had been so tired from overwork from my job lately that I didn't notice. I didn't notice that the samples all seemed to have come from the London area where we first heard of the incident at the post office. I didn't notice when the number of samples kept growing in quantity and urgency, and I didn't notice the tear in my hazmat suit. I received the phone call late in the night. I could tell by the urgency in his voice that this was serious. He told me about the tear discovered by the night shift team during inspection. He told me about the possible exposure to the airborne contaminant from the London incident. He then listed symptoms. I slowly sat down and felt my blood run cold as the information from the phone call began to slowly sink in. I thought back to the incident reports I had read and the symptoms described by the first victims. I didn't notice. They were almost identical to the onset of a cold, the cold that I had been complaining about to my wife, the cold that I have been dismissing as symptoms of overwork and exhaustion, the cold I had been ignoring to make time for my daughter, who I had just kissed goodnight, perhaps for the final time. I didn't notice. I hear voices. Coden, I am hearing voices, and I cannot stand it anymore. Every day I hear loud voices, and it's becoming highly irritant, and I am struggling to do basic things. These voices in my head are so random, and I hear them at home, at work, and even on the bus. I hate the voices, and they provide nothing useful for me and my life. They are a nuisance, and I wish the voices spoke to me about intelligent things, but instead the voices are ramble and incoherent to me. I wish the voices would speak true wisdom to me, but instead the voices are idiotic and time-wasting. What's it like to hear voices? Coden asked me. Go find a room where you can lock yourself in and make sure this room is in a loud area full of people. Make sure you are alone in this room. The voices you hear inside the room that is coming from outside. That is the closest thing you will ever experience or have a little taste of hearing voices. The noises are not coming from the room, and you being the only one in the room. It will be as if you are hearing voices. That is what I experience every day. I did as you asked, and as I was inside an empty room, I locked the door. Outside was busy, and I could hear people talking outside. As I was inside the room on my own listening to the noises outside, it was like I was hearing voices. I can kind of imagine the torment you go through, Coden said to me, and I was happy that I had someone that kind of understood me. It's like being in your apartment, and when the next apartment next to it is being noisy, the irritants you will feel, even though you might live alone and the sound isn't coming from your flat. That is what hearing voices is like. I just want it to stop, and I cannot sleep properly anymore because of these horrible voices. All the voices do in my head is just talk nonsense, and I just want to blow my brains out. How can existence be this cruel? And the worst thing is that voices make me useless. The voices disable me, and I imagine at all the things I could have achieved if it wasn't for the voices. Then one day I found a way to start destroying the voices and to start fighting back. I brought Coden to my home, and he screamed at what I had done. I told him I had killed the voices, but Coden kept saying that I had killed my roommates. Yes, my roommates were causing such noise with their mouths, and now I know how to get rid of voices in my head when I am outside. I thought my dream was real. Now I am wanted by the police. 3 days ago, I dreamed about a man of my neighborhood beating my mom and shouting at her because of a misplacement of her car or something like that. I was in a dream in the end of the day, so I couldn't do anything, but I thought it was actually happening. Moreover, it was night, so when I woke up next morning, the timing seemed too realistic. I woke up very angry. Also, I wait to go to college, and I am in the middle of my summer break from last year of high school. So I am quite young and impulsive. Anyways, my mom works until very late, so it makes sense in my brain for something like this to happen. Now it was morning, and she was in her first job. She didn't tell me of the incident, neither I wanted to ask her because I was very anxious of doing that. I just asked her about the time that she came last night as we were eating. She told me it was around 11 p.m., and she actually gets back the same hour every working day from her 2D job. So because I see this man quite often around at that time, I decided to confront him. I went outside, and when I saw him, I tried to think what should I do to him. In the end, I just told him about it, and he seemed very confused. At that time, I thought he was making it seem like it didn't happen when he actually did it to make himself go away with it. Because I got angry, and I really believed that it happened, I punched him in the face, and I heard something breaking in his face. Immediately, he jumped on me. I make sure in the end that he was not breathing. I managed to headlock him. When the job was over, I did not tell anything to my mom. Since it was not that loud, and we didn't grab any attention, I placed him in my mom's car, and with my limited driving skills, I placed him on his couch inside his home. I knew where he lived. I took his key and prayed no one to find him. I know that he lives alone. Now I am not sure if he lives. In fact, it's 3 days since that. If someone finds him dead in his house, I might be in trouble. I don't go out, or if I go, I make sure it is in very early mornings in order to not be a suspect, as I am active outside in those hours of the incident. I am deeply disappointed and angry with myself, but I don't want to tell no one. I don't know what will happen, but I don't want to go to jail. I pray every day not to be subjected. I don't think the guy knew me since he has not seen me outside, never. Unfortunately, there are a lot of cameras around.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling content.